Well, I'm very pleased to say we are now joined by the Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy. Secretary of State, thank you so much for being with us. Good morning to you. I will, of course, come on to speak to you about youth clubs and this announcement today, but I do want to first talk to you about this migration deal, this one-in, one-out deal. Yeah. Yvette Cooper was sitting where you were yesterday and we were talking about it, but this morning newspapers are reporting that there seem to be quite a few loopholes in this policy, one of which being that if people have got outstanding claims about human rights, they might be exempt from it.
Yeah, so that's not the case at all. The deal that we've struck will allow us to send people back to France who have human rights claims. Those claims will be heard in France. So I know that the Conservative Party has been saying that this is a loophole. It isn't, and we're really confident about that.
OK, so if people have these outstanding human rights claims, it's not going to be a case where they will have to then stay here while that process is being worked through.
I mean, there are people who will try to frustrate the process through the courts, but we're speeding up the court process to make sure that those delays will be minimal, and we will be able to return people to France so that if they have an asylum claim, for example, that claim can be heard in France if they've travelled through France on the way here on small boats.
So we're not going to get stuck in that loop that we've been stuck in from before. The other part as well from the reporting today that has caused some commentary is that it seems that we're paying for all of this both ways, the transportation of them here and the transportation of them back. That doesn't seem fair. Why aren't France chipping in?
Well, we've started this process by making the deal with France. We're going to build on it. So I think the Home Secretary said to you yesterday, sitting in this seat here, that we're starting with small numbers. We're starting to make sure that we get this right and to work out how best this can work in the British interest, but also in the French interest. And we'll continue to build on that and work that through. We're moving at pace. We understand that this is a really critical issue for many people in this country, and we are appalled by the people smugglers who are making huge sums of money out of human misery. We're determined to deal with this.
In your answer there, it seems as if there's space that France could eventually start paying for some of this. Is that the case?
Well, look, we've been very clear, and when President Macron was over here a few weeks ago, I met with him, as did the Home Secretary, and the Prime Minister obviously spent significant amounts of time with him. Been really clear that we want a genuine partnership with France.
Right.
We've spent far too long with politicians, national politicians, just shouting from the sidelines. We as a government have got in the room, we've restored that relationship, and we're working together to tackle what is a very real problem. OK. I
was a bit cheeky, so I do have another topic before I come on to youth clubs. I'm sorry, as Secretary of State, but it's about tax. You'll see it on all the front pages of the papers today. We've got this 50 billion black hole. It's 22 billion, now it's 50 billion. I know you're going to tell me that you're not going to discuss fiscal events before a fiscal event, but there's an issue here and something has to be done. There's an idea of wealth taxes, first of all, from Lord Kinnock. Where is the government on that idea? Well,
the Chancellor has very much poured cold water on that idea, partly because many countries have tried this sort of approach, but mostly because we were elected as a government at a time when taxes on working people were at their highest rate for generations. We want to bring taxes down for people. We want to help support them, put money back into people's pockets, and all the things that we've been doing as a government in the last 12 months have been aimed at that. We've given public sector workers a pay rise. We've raised the amount of money going into people's pockets by cutting energy bills. We are doing everything we can, pulling every lever at our disposal to make sure that working people not just are better off, but feel better off in their daily lives and ease that pressure.
But you'll know that in people's daily lives, they don't feel better off. And while the impulse, the instinct to bring taxes down is probably not going to be the reality if we're honest with each other. It's not going to be the case that you're going to be able to keep taxes low when you have this huge fiscal black hole. You're not going to be able to pay for anything. Or you're going to cut spending on services?
No, look, I mean, our plan is to grow the economy, and that was the absolute central plank of our manifesto we were elected on last year. The plan for change that we've set out is aimed at doing precisely that. Just a few months ago, I was able to welcome the biggest inward investment to the UK in decades in the Universal Theme Park in Bedfordshire. We've managed to get more people into work. The economy has grown faster in the last year of a Labour government than it did in 10 years under the Conservative Party. That's our plan, is to grow the economy, because if all you're doing is slicing up a very small pie, it doesn't help people. You've got to grow the size of the economy.
People hope that economy does grow for your sake and our sake as well. The last point on this, VAT on private healthcare, Lord Kinnock's idea again from the past couple of days. Where's the government on that?
Well, as far as I'm aware, and I haven't spoken to the Health Secretary or the Chancellor about it, but as far as I'm aware, we don't have plans to do that. But
no plans
and I know you started with, say, preempting what I'm about to say, but obviously the Chancellor has to be able to look at this in the round and set out a sensible plan, and I can't preempt that on a TV
that was a little,
as great as Sky News.
That was a little more equivocal than your other answers. So as far as you're aware, and the Chancellor will have her chance.
I literally have had no conversations with anybody about that, so I'd love to be able to answer your question, but as far as I'm aware, there's no plans to do it.
I'm going to keep asking that one then. All right, so let's move on to your trail for today, the youth clubs. £87 million, which sounds like a lot of money. I'm not sure how much it's going to be for each youth club or each
88.
school. 88, sorry, got the number wrong. So how much is each club, school going to get?
So we're targeting it to the areas that need it most.
Right.
We've been absolutely horrified by the fact that so many young people, the majority of young people, tell us that they spend all or almost all of their free time alone in their bedrooms online. The spaces and places that they used to go to in the real world, the youth clubs, the after-school clubs, have disappeared over the last decade and a half. An astonishingly small number of young people have been able to access anything like arts, music, creativity in the last year. The majority can't unless their parents can pay. This funding is targeted at opening up those opportunities to young people again.
So reopening youth clubs, opening new ones, and you said it's going to be targeted. What's the assessment process to decide where it is going to get to go?
So we're looking at parts of the country where there is either no provision or very little provision, where a majority of young people haven't been able to access all those things that make life worth living. And we're not being prescriptive about it. I think the most radical thing about the way that we're doing this is that we're putting communities and young people in the driving seat. They've told us what they need. From some parts of the country, it's not a youth club, it's a bus to get young people to the youth club, because in the surrounding villages outside of a town, in places like Wigan, where I'm the MP, that can often be the barrier. And because public transport has been left in a very parlour state by the last government, it's very difficult for young people to access provision even when it's there. So we're handing that money over to communities and youth providers to be able to decide best how that is spent in partnership with us and young people. And we're really excited about it, because for the first time in over a decade and a half, we're saying to the young people of this country, you matter to us, this generation matters, and we're putting our money where our mouth is.
Okay. A couple more topics with your grace, please, Secretary of State. We're going to talk about housing today. There are two reports today that lay out the bleak picture for people of my generation, and perhaps younger as well, that are just not going to be able to get on the housing ladder at all. I wondered, I know you're going to tell me about the 1.5 million homes to be built. We can talk about whether or not you're going to reach that target, but I wondered about your experience and your friends' sort of experience of buying their first home, how difficult it is.
No, I mean, you probably have this experience as well, is that for a lot, especially in some parts of the country, London, for example, it's almost impossible. It's a dream that is completely out of reach. And when we think about people who rent, we often, the way that we talk about it in public is that they're people in their early 20s. Actually, the average renter now is way into their 30s with a family. It's, renting is a good option for a lot of people, but it can prevent you from having the stability that you need, laying down roots. Too many people have to move year to year. And that's why we're not only building 1.5 million homes, but we've introduced a new set of renters' rights through Parliament to help people achieve that stability, even as we're helping them to get onto the housing ladder. OK, and
as you say, you missed your target this year. There is, by one measure, there's concern that you might not reach that target, and of course we'll keep your feet to the fire on that as to whether or not you do achieve that. I want to speak to you about the Middle East and Gaza. It's been reported that the Israeli Parliament, the Security Council, are going to meet to discuss reoccupation of Gaza. What's the government response to that idea at this point in the war? Well, look,
what we need to achieve in Gaza is two things. One is the very immediate crisis of hostages still being held and aid being withheld. And we've been very, very clear with the Israeli government that we need to open the gates and flood Gaza with aid. People are starving, they're malnourished, they're in need of medical attention. This cannot wait. But the bigger picture is that there hasn't been any progress towards peace in the Middle East for over a decade. And hope is diminishing as more and more settlements are being built. The prospect of a two-state solution is becoming a far distant prospect. And that's one of the reasons why the Prime Minister has been very clear that we are going to move towards the recognition of Palestine, because you cannot establish a meaningful peace process that people have confidence in unless you recognise that there are two partners in this negotiation. There are two states that have to be built. And our message to the Palestinian people is very, very clear. There is hope on the horizon, and the terrorists, the appalling terrorists like Hamas, offer no hope or prospect of peace for people in Palestine or people in Israel. And we now need to move towards meaningful and serious talks to establish the two states that we've talked about for a very long time but made very little progress towards.
Secretary of State Lisa Nandy, thank you very much for being with us this morning. Thank you.